When you're on 26 years, I mean, where's the challenge?
Gives you a charge.
Yeah, what do you need a charge? 26 years, walk away, it's over.
Yeah.
What happens when charm meets chaos on live television? Johnny Carson, the king of late night, welcomed thousands of guests over the years, from beloved Hollywood stars to unpredictable personalities. But not every visit was smooth sailing. Some guests didn't just push the boundaries, they tore them down completely. From awkward silences to downright shocking moments, these are the most disrespectful guests Johnny Carson ever had. 1. Wayne Newton.
Johnny never got up, even from his desk. And I confronted him, and he turned pale. And I told him what my intentions were. And he wouldn't get up. And so I smacked him.
Wayne Newton wasn't just disrespectful on air. He took it to a whole other level by actually showing up at NBC to confront Carson in person. And yes, it got physical. Here's what happened. Carson had been making jokes about Wayne Newton in his monologues. Now, if you know anything about Carson, you know he made jokes about everyone. It was part of the gig. Politicians, celebrities, even himself. Nobody was safe. But Wayne Newton didn't see it that way. Newton was a huge Vegas performer known as Mr. Las Vegas himself. He had a squeaky clean image and a high-pitched voice that honestly made him an easy target for comedians. Carson would crack jokes suggesting that Newton was mobbed up, that he had connections to organized crime. He'd make jokes about Newton's voice, his style, everything. For a while, Newton let it slide. But the jokes kept coming, night after night. Finally, Newton had enough. According to reports, Newton actually went to NBC's Burbank studios to confront Carson face to face. This wasn't a planned appearance. This was Newton showing up, angry and ready for a confrontation. The details get a bit murky here because there are different versions of what happened. Some say Newton grabbed Carson. Some say he pushed him. Others claim he actually threw a punch. What we know for sure is that it got physical, and it was serious enough that security had to get involved. Carson, being the professional he was, never really talked about it publicly in detail, but people close to the situation said he was genuinely shaken. This wasn't just some cranky guest complaining during a commercial break. This was a celebrity coming to his workplace to physically intimidate him. The wildest part? Newton later claimed that after the confrontation, Carson stopped making jokes about him. Whether that's true or Newton just remembering it the way he wanted to, we'll never know, but the fact remains. Wayne Newton is probably the only guest who ever got physical with Johnny Carson, and that puts him at the top of this list. Think about how disrespectful that is. Carson gave thousands of performers a platform over 30 years. He made careers. He boosted album sales and movie tickets just by having someone on his show. And Newton's response to a few jokes? Physical confrontation. That's beyond disrespectful. That's assault. After the incident, there was apparently a meeting between NBC executives, Carson's people, and Newton's representatives. Some kind of understanding was reached, though the details were never made public. Newton maintains that he and Carson eventually made peace, though they were never close after that. The interesting thing is that Carson continued to make jokes about other celebrities after the Newton incident. He didn't let it intimidate him into changing his whole approach to comedy. But according to some sources, he did ease up on Newton specifically. Whether that was out of fear, out of respect for the understanding they'd reached, or just because he'd moved on to other targets, we'll never know. 2. Madonna.
What would I call it?
It's called a bustier.
A bustier?
Yeah.
Ah, that's nice. Sounds good, doesn't it?
Yeah, it sounds great.
Madonna's 1994 appearance on The Tonight Show is legendary for all the wrong reasons. She came on the show to promote something, but what she really did was make everyone, including Carson, extremely uncomfortable. Now, Madonna was known for pushing boundaries. That was her whole thing. She built a career on being provocative, sexual, and controversial. But there's a difference between being edgy in your music videos and being inappropriate on a talk show at a time when families are watching. During the interview, Madonna was aggressively flirty with Carson, but it wasn't the fun, playful kind of flirting that you might see between a host and a charismatic guest. It was pushy, persistent, and honestly kind of aggressive. She wouldn't let up. She made sexual comments, talked about things that were way too explicit for the time slot, and kept pushing even when Carson tried to redirect the conversation. You could see him getting uncomfortable. His smile became more forced. He tried to laugh it off, but you could tell he wanted the interview to end. The thing about Carson was that he was from a different era. He was professional, polished, and always maintained a certain level of decorum on his show. Yes, he could be risque in his jokes, but there were lines he didn't cross, especially not at 11:30 at night when kids might still be watching. Madonna either didn't know where those lines were or she didn't care. She seemed determined to shock him, to get a reaction, to push him out of his comfort zone. And while some people might argue that's what makes good television, it's also deeply disrespectful to your host. Carson had invited her on his show. He was giving her free publicity. The least she could do was respect the format and the audience. Instead, she treated it like her personal stage to be as outrageous as possible, regardless of how it made Carson feel. There's been debate over the years about whether Madonna was being genuinely provocative or if it was all an act for attention. Either way, the result was the same. She disrespected Carson and the show that had welcomed her. Let's dig deeper into what actually happened during that interview. Madonna came out and immediately started making suggestive comments. She talked about her sex life in graphic detail. She made innuendos that were barely innuendos. They were just explicit statements with a thin veil of humor over them. Carson would try to change the subject, asking her about her music or her upcoming projects, and she'd turn every answer into something sexual. It was like she was playing a game to see how uncomfortable she could make him, and she was winning. At one point, she leaned in close to Carson in a way that invaded his personal space. She touched his arm, his shoulder, his hand, constant physical contact that you could tell made him uncomfortable. Carson was a Midwestern guy who valued personal boundaries, and Madonna was bulldozing right through them. The audience didn't quite know how to react either. There were some nervous laughs, some gasps, and a lot of awkward silence. This wasn't the fun, playful banter that made The Tonight Show great. This was watching someone make their host deeply uncomfortable on live television. By 1994, Madonna had already built a reputation for being controversial. She had released her sex book, which was incredibly explicit. She had done music videos that pushed every boundary possible. She had appeared at award shows in outfits that barely qualified as clothing. Controversy was her brand. But there's a difference between being controversial in your own work and bringing that controversy onto someone else's show. When you're a guest, you have a responsibility to respect the host and the format. You can still be yourself, but you need to adjust your behavior to fit the context. Madonna refused to do that. She acted like The Tonight Show was her platform to do whatever she wanted, and Carson was just there to facilitate it. That's not how it works. Carson was the host. It was his show. And she treated him like a prop in her performance art piece. The aftermath of this appearance was interesting. Some people loved it. They thought Madonna was being bold and fearless, refusing to conform to outdated standards of propriety. Others were horrified and thought she'd crossed a major line. The debate went on for weeks in the media. But here's the thing. Regardless of whether you thought her behavior was empowering or offensive, it was undeniably disrespectful to Carson. She made him uncomfortable in his own studio, on his own show, in front of his own audience. She put him in a position where he had to either play along with something he clearly wasn't comfortable with, or shut her down and look like the bad guy. That's not fair to a host, especially one who had been nothing but welcoming to her. Carson could have refused to have her on the show. He could have cut her segment short. But he was professional enough to let her have her moment, even though it came at his expense. 3. Charles Grodin.
So if you ask me what I'm up to, I'm not going to answer because I'm not going to make a fool of myself and watch you go to sleep as I answer the question.
Charles Grodin was a frequent guest on The Tonight Show, and he had a very particular style. He played this character, or maybe it wasn't a character, we'll never really know, of a cranky, difficult guest who complained about everything. Most of the time, it was funny. Carson seemed to be in on the joke, and their interactions had this playful tension that made for good television. But there was one appearance where Grodin took it too far. During this particular interview, Grodin started questioning whether Carson actually cared about his guests. He suggested that Carson was just going through the motions, that he didn't really listen to people, and that the whole thing was fake. Now, imagine you're Johnny Carson. You've been doing this show for decades. You've interviewed thousands of people. You've launched careers, supported up-and-coming comedians, and created moments of genuine connection with your guests. And here's Charles Grodin essentially calling you a phony on your own show. Carson's face said it all. You could see the smile fade. The playfulness disappeared. For a moment, it looked like Carson was actually hurt by what Grodin was saying. The tension in the studio was real, and it was uncomfortable to watch. Was Grodin joking? Was this part of his bit? It was hard to tell, and that was the problem. If you're going to roast your host, it needs to be clearly playful or clearly part of a comedy bit that everyone's agreed to. This felt like Grodin had crossed a line and was attacking Carson's integrity. Carson recovered, of course. He was a professional. He laughed it off and moved the conversation forward. But you could tell that something had shifted. The warmth that usually existed between them was gone. The disrespect here wasn't just in the words Grodin said. It was in questioning the authenticity of a man who had given him a platform multiple times. It was biting the hand that fed him and doing it in front of millions of viewers. Grodin later said that he and Carson had a complicated relationship and that Carson actually enjoyed their confrontational dynamic. Maybe that's true, but in that moment, it felt less like playful banter and more like genuine disrespect. 4. Chevy Chase.
I wanted to get alone, little doggy, and write my own thing. Right. And get married. And thank you very much.
Chevy Chase has a reputation in Hollywood for being difficult, arrogant, and rude. And his appearances on The Tonight Show did nothing to dispel that reputation. Chase was a huge star in the 80s. He had been part of the original Saturday Night Live cast, and he'd gone on to make successful movies like Caddyshack and National Lampoon's Vacation. He had every reason to be confident, but confidence is one thing, arrogance is another. When Chase appeared on Carson's show, he often came across as dismissive and condescending. He would interrupt Carson. He would talk over him. He would make jokes at Carson's expense that didn't feel good-natured. They felt mean. There's a fine line between playful ribbing and being genuinely rude, and Chase seemed to cross that line regularly. He acted like he was doing Carson a favor by being there, rather than recognizing that The Tonight Show was giving him a platform to promote his projects. One of the most frustrating things about Chase's behavior was how he would disregard Carson's attempts to steer the conversation. Carson was a master interviewer. He knew how to bring out interesting stories, how to make his guests look good, and how to create entertaining television. But Chase seemed to think he knew better. He would derail conversations, refuse to answer questions properly, and generally act like the whole thing was beneath him. It was the kind of behavior that made you wonder why Carson kept inviting him back. The thing about arrogance is that it's insulting to everyone involved. It's insulting to the host who prepared for your appearance. It's insulting to the crew who set everything up. And it's insulting to the audience who tuned in to see you. Chase's behavior on The Tonight Show was a perfect example of how success can go to someone's head. He had forgotten that just a few years earlier, he was a struggling comedian looking for any opportunity to get on TV. Now that he had made it, he treated one of television's most respected hosts like he was lucky to have Chevy Chase on his show. That's not just disrespectful, that's delusional. 5. Bob Hope.
I was listening with your wife back there. You know, she's so amazed. She didn't know that. She said she prepares your clothes and you only have one.
Bob Hope is a comedy legend. There's no denying that. But his later appearances on The Tonight Show revealed a darker side of the comedian. He couldn't accept that his time had passed. Hope had been a massive star for decades. He was a film icon, a USO hero, and a household name. But by the time the 80s rolled around, his comedy style had become dated. His jokes didn't land the way they used to. The audience was polite, but they weren't really laughing. The problem was that Hope didn't seem to notice, or he didn't care. He would come on The Tonight Show and do his old routine, telling jokes that had been funny in 1945 but felt stale in 1985. And when the audience didn't respond enthusiastically, he would get frustrated. There are accounts of Hope becoming difficult behind the scenes. He would complain about his spot in the show. He would demand more time. He would get annoyed if Carson didn't laugh hard enough at his jokes. Essentially, he started acting like the show owed him something. The disrespect here is subtle but real. Hope seemed to think that his legacy meant he deserved special treatment, that the normal rules didn't apply to him. He would go long on his segments, cutting into other guests' time. He would ignore the producer's signals to wrap up. Carson, ever the gentleman, never publicly complained about Hope's behavior. But people who worked on the show said it became a problem. Hope's appearances went from being a treat to being something the staff dreaded. The sad thing is that Hope had earned the right to be on that show any time he wanted. His contributions to comedy and entertainment were immeasurable, but that didn't give him the right to be difficult, demanding, or dismissive of the show's format and other guests. Respect is a two-way street. Carson respected Hope's legacy and always treated him like the legend he was. Hope should have respected Carson's show and the people who made it happen. Instead, he acted entitled, and that entitled behavior was deeply disrespectful. 6. Jerry Lewis. Jerry Lewis was another comedy icon who became difficult in his later years. But Lewis's disrespect went beyond just being cranky on camera. According to reports, he was aggressive and even physically abusive towards staff and crew members. Lewis had a long and complicated career. He had been half of one of the most successful comedy teams ever with Dean Martin. He'd starred in dozens of films. He had hosted the Muscular Dystrophy Telethon for decades. He was a legitimate legend. But Lewis also had a reputation for having a terrible temper and treating people poorly, especially those he considered beneath him in the Hollywood hierarchy. And those tendencies apparently came out during his appearances on The Tonight Show. There are stories of Lewis yelling at crew members. Some accounts say he would get physical, pushing people, grabbing equipment, being aggressive when things didn't go exactly the way he wanted. He would snap at producers and directors, refusing to follow the show's format. The term blacklisted might be strong, but there were definitely points where Carson's people didn't want to deal with Lewis anymore. He had become more trouble than he was worth, even considering his legendary status. What makes this particularly disrespectful is that these crew members and staff were just doing their jobs. They weren't responsible for anything that went wrong. They were professionals trying to make good television. And Lewis treated them like servants who weren't performing to his standards. Carson valued his crew. He knew their names, appreciated their work, and treated them with respect. When a guest came on and abused those people, It was a direct insult to Carson and everything he stood for. Lewis's behavior represents a particular kind of Hollywood arrogance, the belief that fame and success give you the right to treat people badly. It's the worst kind of disrespect because it's punching down, attacking people who can't fight back without risking their jobs. 7. Lola Falana.
Pretty song.
Thank you.
For the good times.
For the good time.
Lola Falana was a popular entertainer in the 70s, a singer, dancer, and actress who had appeared on television, in films, and in Las Vegas shows. But her appearance on The Tonight Show revealed a side of her that shocked viewers and left Carson visibly uncomfortable. During the interview, Falana made statements that were racist and bigoted. The exact details of what she said have been debated over the years, but witnesses and reports confirm that she made comments that were completely inappropriate and offensive. Carson, to his credit, tried to redirect the conversation. He didn't laugh. He didn't encourage her. You could see him trying to figure out how to handle the situation without making it worse. This was live television, after all. He couldn't just cut away. This type of disrespect is different from the others on this list. It's not about ego or entitlement. It's about bringing hate and bigotry onto a show that was meant to entertain people from all backgrounds. Carson prided himself on running a show that was welcoming and inclusive for its time. When Falana made those statements, she disrespected not just Carson and his show, but every viewer who tuned in expecting an hour of harmless entertainment. She used the platform Carson gave her to spread messages of division and hate. The aftermath of this appearance was significant. Falana's career suffered. She was criticized in the press and by other entertainers. Some venues didn't want to book her anymore, and she was never invited back to The Tonight Show. This incident serves as a reminder that the platform of a show like The Tonight Show comes with responsibility. Millions of people are watching. What you say matters. And when you use that platform to spread bigotry, you've crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. Carson handled it as well as anyone could have in that situation, but the fact that he had to handle it at all, that someone would come on his show and behave that way, represents perhaps the most fundamental kind of disrespect on this entire list.